My name is Paul McIntosh, and it gives me great pleasure to sit in conversation with Mr. Brian Benjamin, founder of the Young Professionals United for Change. In my opinion, Mr. Benjamin is one of the pillars of the Harlem community, and his voice is necessary as we look at issues related to education, politics, and culture. And so it gives me great pleasure to sit in conversation with Mr. Benjamin. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Paul.
I must say to you that as I anticipated our having this conversation, I began to think about the great poet Audre Lorde once said that we should applaud our struggles and each victory should be applauded because it is so easy just to give up and not to try at all. And we've had some victories here in Wadley, and in no small measure, you have been the architect of those victories.
Oh, wow.
A couple of years ago, we had the honor of witnessing the presence of busloads of young ladies and young men from Howard University that you had brought here, and they were so handsome in their suits and ties and blazers. And the young ladies presented themselves very attractively in dresses, and they went into the classrooms and they talked about their lives, and they encouraged and inspired those young people. And that was a victory. About a year or so later, you came into a classroom, and if memory serves me correctly, it was a world history class. And again, you spoke to a class of young people, and likewise, they were encouraged and inspired. And that, of course, was a victory. But perhaps the definitive experience which you were the architect of occurred last May when you brought together a collective of professionals from just a myriad of professions. There were lawyers, there were business people, there were civil rights activists.
That's right.
And these individuals, again...
You had a television personality as well.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway, these individuals went into various classrooms, and of course, they inspired and encouraged our young people. I've wondered, what is it about your desire and that initiative which brings young people and those kinds of individuals together that is important? Why do you do that?
I do it because it's what inspired me. When I was in high school and college, I didn't have a lot of natural role models of folks who I wanted to be like professionally, you know, and what I had to do was I had to read about people I wanted to be about in the magazines and newspapers. And it wasn't until I was a sophomore in college and I actually got to meet President Bill Clinton, because I was involved with the College Democrats. That meeting inspired me in a way that I hadn't been inspired before and set me on a course that I'm on presently. And so what I like to do is to provide that opportunity for younger people who might have been in the same situation that I was in and are not getting those opportunities to see people who they could look at and say, I want to be like this person professionally. I mean, you know, a lot of us might have folks who we believe in their character and we accept who they are, and we're very excited about the roles they play in our lives. In my case, that was my mother and my stepfather. But professionally, I had to look to other sources to help provide some of that inspiration. And so one of the things I'm ecstatic about is bringing folks who come from our neighborhoods into the classroom to speak to young people about who they are. I might inspire a couple people, but someone else might inspire a couple others. And all of a sudden, you don't know, you can be setting someone's life path up just by your presentation for an hour or so. And so I'm very excited about that, and that's why I do it.
Well, you know, when I came to Harlem, I remember speaking to some what you might call old heads. and they would talk about how when they were young children, they were able to walk into their neighborhoods and maybe see a Langston Hughes, or see a Malcolm X, or a doctor, or a lawyer.
Absolutely.
And having the occasion to make that kind of contact with those individuals of substance inspired and encouraged them.
It makes you feel good about yourself.
Precisely.
There are so many. I live on 116th Street between 5th and Lenox. You have no idea how many incredible young and older African Americans who we can just say, on your way to work, stop by Wadley. speak to a class, participate in the program. And we have folks who work for President Obama. We have folks who have worked across the globe, bankers, lawyers, doctors, teachers, people who have done so many amazing things around the world who live right here in Harlem, not even to mention people outside, who live right here in Harlem, who all we got to do is just bring them in. And that's something that I'm committed to being a part of.
Well, I have two questions. One, what is the mission of Young Professionals for Change? And the other question has to do with how I see you.
Sure.
I see you as an example. I mean, I can think of something that Albert Einstein said, for example. He said that setting an example is not the main means of influencing people. It is the only means. And when I look at you and I see the example that you have set, it says to me that our young people need to know something about you. So I have two questions. One, what is the mission of Young Professionals? And two, could you give us perhaps a brief autobiography of Brian Benjamin?
Sure. So let me start with the latter and bring that into the former. I was born in Harlem Hospital, 36 years ago. My mother was an immigrant from Guyana. She and my father were not married. He was a police officer. They met in the courts, and he was not interested in having children. And so she, like so many other of our women, was a single mother for a while before she met my stepfather, and they subsequently got married. We lived in Brooklyn and Queens for the majority of my life. I was in Harlem for a few years before going away to Brooklyn and Queens. So I don't have my formative years in Harlem. But I'm a New York City boy, and I went to high school. Archbishop Malloy High School in Queens, all boys school, and got very involved in track and chess. And I was pretty good in both. And I got recruited. See, this is the thing. I never saw myself as someone who was going to go to a Princeton, a Harvard, a Yale. That wasn't in the environment that I existed. But track-wise and my grades put me in a situation where I was recruited by these top colleges. And they came to me and said, we want you to look at coming to our colleges. When Brown University sent a letter to my mother, to me actually, to my house, we were like, what's Brown University? We had no idea. Come to find out it was an Ivy League school. And so that whole world that I was able to penetrate as someone from the inner city happened because sports was my outlet. And I'm very cognizant of that. And so I ended up going to Brown University. I majored in public policy. I ran track there, but I got very involved in politics. I mentioned to you earlier about my meeting with Bill Clinton. I got very involved in politics, became senior class president, and really sort of took myself into a public service direction. I ended up getting frustrated with the idea that money and business and power controlled so much of our lives. At the time, Mayor Bloomberg had become mayor. He went to Harvard Business School. George W. Bush just became president. He went to Harvard Business School. And I said, well, you know what? I'm going to go to Harvard Business School. I mean, I just said this to myself. I'm going to go there because I want to be able to influence money to focus on the priorities that I think matter. And so I merged my public policy background with an understanding of business and the economy when I went to Harvard Business School, and afterwards, subsequently, I've been living in New York. I was an investment banker for a while, and now I help build affordable housing in our community, New York and New Jersey, with my partner at Genesis Company. It's actually the first brother I met when I went to Harvard Business School. Is now my business partner, and we're building housing together. In 2007, I created Young Professionals United for Change, primarily because I was very active politically, and when President Obama ran, I noticed that a lot of the events and activities that I was attending to didn't have a strong presence of minorities, particularly young professionals who I knew had some change. They had some disposable income. And I said, well, why is that the case? It's the case because we traditionally have not been involved. And so I noticed a lot of my friends were asking me questions. Hey, what's going on with Obama? Can he win? Can he not win? I want to get involved. They didn't know how to do it. So I created Young Professionals for Change initially as an entity to bring a variety of groups together to focus on helping President Obama get elected. That was initially what happened. And we threw a fundraiser for him. the outpouring of support was incredible. I had 800 young professionals show up. And what I did was I got everyone's information, emails, et cetera, and that began the building of what's now 4,000 plus young professional listserv that has been utilized subsequent to President Obama the first time to help with things like Haiti relief, helping to bring the next generation of professionals along who are running for office, all those kind of things. But the main purpose is civic engagement. We, as young professionals, have been involved in the nonprofit space to some degree, but very uninvolved in the civic space. NAACP, Urban League, some of our real community boards, some of our real civic issues. That's what I kind of created this group to do. And so Wadley actually sits in the middle of education, politics, and where our culture is going. There's so many things involved. And one of the things that I'm really concerned about is a lot of my young professional peers are the ones who charter schools pull on to sit on boards and be active and involved. And I didn't see that same level of effort with the non-charter schools. And so what I decided to do was use my platform and the ability to galvanize young professionals and say, we also have 1 million plus students who actually aren't part of the charter school system, and we need to be helpful in the same way that those folks are with charter schools to make sure that the majority of our kids who are primarily in public schools have a chance to succeed as well.
As you look out across the educational landscape, and I'm sure, because we've had several conversations in regards to Wadley specifically,
Sure.
And making oblique references to what you've just said vis-a-vis charter schools, pardon me, what do you see as being essential if we're going to be able to hopefully embrace the mass of our young people who in many ways are just kind of left out of the system? They can't be serviced by many of the charter schools.
Yeah.
And that's a real concern of mine as someone who is in contact with young people almost daily. Hence, I really wanted them to see, people like you, and just to have you to kind of talk to them.
Sure.
But anyway, what do you see, or how do you envision the landscape, particularly in light of what's about to happen when the new mayor is elected?
Sure. My view is I think success breeds success. When people see things working, they tend to flock to it. And so one of the things that I'm very excited about us really creating here is if we can really focus on the 12th graders being successful, if we can really change the mindset at that level, I believe, not to use language from politicians I don't agree with, I believe that there is a trickle-down effect that, by the way, will help to us address with other issues. When people see, wow, the guy who lived next door to me, who isn't that much smarter than me, he's going to college, she's going to college. All of a sudden, they start saying, well, wait a minute, I need to go to college. If you listen to Michelle Obama, and people ask Michelle Obama, why did you go to Princeton? She said, and I quote, I never saw myself potentially going to an Ivy League school, but when I saw my older brother get into Princeton, I said, well, crap, I know him. If he can get into Princeton, I surely can as well. And I do think we really have a mindset in our community that, folks can have kids out of wedlock, no big deal, young girls. There's no societal pressures on success in our community. And so what we have to do is flip that on its head, where lack of success doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense because, wait a minute, everybody on our block, their kids going to college, same issue, same background, same demand, all of those kind of things. I personally feel that that's kind of what we got to really try to do. And why Wadley's so important is because if we can make Wadley work, then then every other school should be able to work. So Wadley is I've said this since I met you. Right? Wadley is ground zero for the educational reform movement in the city. And I use educational reform in the sense of our entire system, not the way others use it, which is we have got to start looking at how we can engage the private sector, meaning private individuals like myself, which is why I put myself out to try to be involved, how we can start engaging the private sector, the community activists, the civic leaders to make a difference within our school systems without costing us a dime. See, one of the things that people always say is, oh, we can't afford it, we can't afford it. Yeah, we always can afford money for more police. We're saying, fine, we're going to, without any resources, right? No one's paying any of us to do anything, and we're not getting extra money to do anything. Without resources, we're going to make a difference. We're going to figure out a way to make a constructive difference in our kids' lives so that they have the same opportunities that some of us have been so fortunate to get.
You know, oftentimes I think about the plight of black people and what happens to us collectively. I think of us as being like the canary in the mine.
Yeah.
I was reading a study recently which indicated that single-parent households by white women rivals single-parent households headed by black women. And as long as that was something that we, you know, pretty much were predominant in, when I say we, I mean black people, it was, you know, no big deal. I mean, as I said, it was sort of like the canary in the mine. But now that it appears that some of those same conditions that plagued us is also plaguing white people, there's more concern. So I share that question with you because, I mean, I've often heard it said that we live in a post-racial society. And I know that I'm deviating from the substance of what we initially thought we would talk about, but I think it's all germane.
We're having a conversation.
Exactly. So my question is, do you consider this a post-racial society now that we have a black elected president?
No, not at all. I mean, we have a black president, but what, as a lot of us are seeing, presidents aren't dictators, so as a result, you've got a whole web of an infrastructure that he or she would have to deal with. Let's not forget the most fundamental issue is how you got there in the first place. President Obama raised $1 billion just last time around to become president. The large majority of that did not come from black or brown hands. A variety of reasons why that's the case. But guess what? If you raise $1 billion, you have interest that you need to be mindful of related to that money. And so I think one of the things that we have to understand is the racial dynamics that has set up the present day comes along with economic disempowerment and a psychological mindset that is the issue that we have to deal with. And until we can address, and that by the way impacts not only minorities, it impacts the majority as well. So I mean, so there's a view people are saying, oh, well, we got to go deal with the poor and the black folks. Well, wait a minute. Why is it poor and black folks? There's more poor white folks than poor black folks. But the mindset is as such that we are the poor ones. And so I think one of the things that for us to get to post-racial society, we need to first deal with economic parity, which, by the way, is a long ways off. And I think that is one of the things that you got to address because resources matter so much in our society, which is part of the fight, the whole issue with the charter schools versus the non-charter schools, right? The charter schools got to have a lot of resources. How do they have that? That's another conversation. But, you know, that's what we're trying to address.
You know, I'm resisting the urge to look at you, and I don't mean this negatively, I mean this in terms of just conversation. You know, oftentimes we talk about the talented 10th.
Yeah, right,
you know,
right.
And I think I might even have read something that you said with regards to black people that have made it, kind of, you know, isolating themselves from the day-to-day concerns of ordinary folk.
Correct.
And that was a concern of yours, you know. Given the perspective that there are those who might consider you the talented 10th.
Sure.
And I don't know if there's some collective attitude that might present that kind of perspective to some folk. But you have issued a call that to the, quote, talented 10th to, you know, to put on your breastplate and to come and join the battle to edify and make our communities much better. Are you some uniquely, or are you all, and I'm just using the language, some uniquely gifted intellects which allows you to access those kinds of vocations and those kinds of jobs? Do you have some unique talents that separates you all from the rest of us?
No, and quite frankly, the you all, which would be the me all, we are the beneficiaries of the 60s and the 70s.
Precisely.
We didn't just kind of get here by magic.
Precisely.
And so that's a big part of what drives me is, wait a minute, there were a lot of smart people who could have gone to the Harvard Business Schools and everywhere else. They just weren't given an opportunity. We just the ones who got an opportunity, and as a result, we have access to rooms and situations and structures that have traditionally been unattainable to us. Here's the issue. As a result of that, many young professionals who went to these great schools, doctors, lawyers, bankers, all the great things that, a lot of folks in the 60s and 70s struggled and fought for. Also, most of us got a whole lot of debt from the school system, right? Law school's $120,000, business school's So what happens is folks get out and are so concerned about not getting fired, working that 100 hours, trying to keep up with the guy next to them who's not as good as you are, but maybe his father is best friends with your boss. I mean, the playing field of the same issue just moves now to the business sector, and as a result, folks are like, listen, I don't have the time to leave this space to help the next guy because I got to help myself.
Right.
As a result, one of the things that I have focused on, and we were talking about this earlier in our meeting as we talked about moving forward next year, you've got to look at calling on this next generation differently than how people have been called in the past.
Exactly.
In the past, you say there's an issue, let's have a meeting, people sitting down for 5 hours. Well, this group's saying, wait a minute, I don't have 5 hours, I have an hour, and I need you to call me and ask me to do something specific. I want to help, but I can't help in the same way that others might be able to help. And so what we have to do, as those of us who are trying to galvanize our community to make a difference, we've got to think more creatively about how to get everybody involved. There are going to be those of us who are going to march in the streets and who are going to fight that fight in the streets, but there are going to be some of us who can put together the marketing plan, and some of us who could do the video, and some of us who probably can do deal with some of the legal issues. Some people can put together the business plan. We've got to think more creatively because our enemy is more creative. They are advancing. You can have others advance. The Tea Party, in my opinion, not to get too political, the Tea Party is the whole essence of what we should be doing. Why? The Tea Party is a grassroots movement of folks. They are the folks in the Republican Party who are not very wealthy, by and large. They're getting funded by wealthy people, but they're not very wealthy. But what they're doing is using the bodies and to make a difference and forcing the infrastructure of the Republican Party to heed their demands.
Excuse me.
That is not too dissimilar from how African Americans primarily should be within our infrastructure. We are the majority of, listen, you look at the city council, it's a majority-minority world we're living in, but a lot of us are not as active, not calling to task those who are supposed to be representing us on a range of issues. And I think that's kind of where my head is at. But I think what we really got to do, and what I focus on, because it's kind of what I do, I was an investment banker, so I kind of know what that world is like. I kind of know how my hours work. I kind of know the infrastructure. I know the lawyers. I know what their jobs, I know the infrastructure. So I know how to approach them, particularly the ones of color, and get them to get involved in important issues in our community.
I know you have to go, so I just have a couple of questions remaining. We focus on these occasions because we're really trying to prepare the next generation. We're trying to empower our communities. We're trying to inspire young people to become a Brian Benjamin. We're trying to inspire them to become another Ben Carson, or another Barack Obama.
No question.
What can you say to young people that might see this conversation that will encourage them to, in fact, believe that they can become a Brian Benjamin? I mean, one of my sources of frustration is that, unfortunately, many of our young people, through no fault of their own, they have a deficit in their self-esteem. They might see a brother hustling on the street. They might see someone with the pants hanging off their behinds. They don't have the occasion to walk out of their house and see a Brian Benjamin. And when I conversate with these young people, I can see that in their hearts, they really are about the desire to try and become better than they presently are.
Sure.
But they don't have, the avenues are somewhat thwarted and they're frustrated. So I wonder what can I say to them. In fact, I remember a conversation that I had with Cornel West once, and he talked about how he was giving a speech in Newark, New Jersey, and this one young man who obviously was, you know, the ringleader, and his pants were hanging off his behind, came up to him and said, "Oh, well, you know, I know that you're a smart brother. You have all of these degrees, but I live in the hood. You know, I got to hustle. You know, I just don't have the options that you have." And the story that was related to him was one that caused him to just throw up his hands in exasperation. And he said to this young man, you know, "I'm just going to have to pray for you." He was so frustrated, a man with all of his intellectual achievements and all of his, you know, the possibilities to help shape people. He just felt frustrated. And oftentimes, I meet young people who, in some sense, relate the same kind of story to me that was related to the good doctor. What would you say to someone? And I'm not saying that you're the omni-cure-all. You can, you know, advise everybody, but I'm searching for answers that I can give these young people when I'm confronted with those kinds of individuals that will help them to, you know, they think that there's some hope.
That's right. I mean, I didn't grow up in a bed of roses. Born in a single mother household. When I was younger, in my teens, I used to fight on the streets. I used to carry a knife in Brooklyn. Got kicked out of junior high school. I mean, there are a number of things that I don't present because it's not what I'm trying to present. I'm trying to move forward. But I've gone through, personally, a lot of very troubling issues. I was off the written path for a while.
What pulled you back? You know, what was there to...
Yeah, I think what pulled me back was a couple things. I think I said to myself, my mother was a single mother. My father didn't have kids. I didn't have to be here. And I first focused on, I just wanted to make my mom proud. That's how I started out. I want to make her proud. Because when I got kicked out of junior high school, it was a real turning moment because she just cried. She didn't beat me. She didn't cry. She just was so devastated, and I felt so guilty. And so, for me, it became a whole thing where, you know what? I'm gonna make my mom proud. I'm going to go there and play this game with these people I hate, just so she can feel proud. And so that's how I started out. And what that ended up leading me to was sort of with that single-minded focus. It led me to play a game which then changed the dynamic. So then it became about me winning at this game, me getting top grades. I didn't have a real place I was trying to head besides I wanted to make my mother proud, and I knew success at school would make her proud. And so I then got to a really good high school, and I was top of the class, and everything was about accolades for her. To this day, I still kind of do some of that, to be honest with you. But then eventually, it turned into me having a goal of where I wanted to be. I wanted to be a politician because I wanted to make a difference in people's lives. And I wanted to sort of deal with this infrastructure that we're all focused on. And so I sort of started moving down that road. And that road led me to community activism, because what do politicians what are they supposed to do? Help the community. So I've been really focused on that. Community board, 10 I'm involved, and other things. But it all started from sort of saying, I care about my legacy. I care about my family name. I care about where and who I come from. And I really was dealing with my mom at that point, and I want her legacy to be a good one, and that's really reflected through me. So that's really what kind of turned me around a little bit, and I think what a lot of our young people need to do is just recognize you've got to be willing to stand outside of the pack, and that's hard to do, but it's easy to do if you kind of have a goal that you kind of put your arms around, like I want to accomplish this. And then you just move heaven and earth to get there. I mean, it's not the easiest thing to do, and I totally get it. But for me, it was making my mom proud, and that really sort of turned me from heading off to a jail to going to business school and getting a job and doing all these good things in life, I think.
Well,
So as a result of that, I believe in them. Like when I see some of these young boys, I see myself.
okay.
And so it's,
Okay, good.
I don't see myself as I'm here to save anybody.
Okay.
I see myself as trying to be for them what I wished someone was for me.
Okay, good. I said earlier that you were an example, and I was just thinking about something that a pastor I used to know would say. He said that a good example is better than a good sermon. So you've been a good example, and I don't use, at least I try not to use words insincerely.
Yeah.
And I really personally have to thank you for being, to quote Ossie Davis, being the shining example that black manhood that you are.
Oh, thank you.
And as we conclude, because I've kept you here much longer than I said I was going to keep you here, I was just reminded of something that Ella Baker said. She said that the struggle is eternal. The tribe increases, but somebody else carries on. So I have to thank you for being that somebody, that Malcolm, that Martin, that Marcus Garvey, that Ella Baker, that's somebody else that carries on. Having said that, I sincerely thank you for allowing me to have this conversation with you, and it is my sincere hope that those young ladies and young men that might see this conversation will be moved and inspired and encouraged as I have been.
Let me say one more thing. I really think for us to succeed as a people, we have to work together. I know that's easier said than done, but I think sometimes we get caught up in our own egos.
Right,
I don't
exactly.
like this person don't like that person, we can't work together.
Exactly.
And things that our community, the issues that our community really needs to move forward don't get addressed. And
Precisely.
so I really try to, and what we're doing with this project, we're bringing in the Urban League Young Professionals, we're bringing in the National Action Network, we're bringing in all these other groups that have their own presence and saying, we all have our own presence, but we all believe that our kids are the future. So let's take Wadley as ground zero and work together to try to make a difference. And so I'm excited to do that, and I hope that our kids and our kids' kids looking forward would say, thank God that they decided to do that at Wadley and make a difference in our lives.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, my brother.
All right.